Very good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the OLID Consulting monthly PM Roundtable. My name is Ade Adeyemi. I'm the CEO at OLID Consulting. If you're joining us for the first time, OLID Consulting is a management consulting firm. We specialize in IT professional services in the areas of staffing, training, and project delivery services. So we do connect IT professionals to opportunities within the industry. We also provide training and employment placement services for individuals that are looking to get into the fields of project management, business analysis, and agile delivery services. Our mandate for the PM Roundtable is to create an avenue where our IT professionals community can share information, network, discuss industry trends, and present opportunity for career growth. Essentially, our goal is to raise leaders, and we certainly hope today's roundtable will further that agenda. Our topic for today is around cultural differences and its impact on teams. We've got a great group of panelists on the call today that will be sharing their experience. We'll be talking about some of these very, very important topics around cultural differences and its impact on team. And of course, it's in celebration of International Women's Month. And this month's edition of the Roundtable, for the first time this year, I do have a co-moderator joining me today, our very own Lola Adeyemi. So before we get started, we're going to start with some introductions. We'll get the panelists to introduce themselves. But before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to introduce Lola Adeyemi. Lola, welcome, Lola.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ade. Thanks, everyone, for coming in today. I'm excited to be here. Should I go ahead and introduce myself, or you're going to introduce me, Ade?
I'll say feel free to introduce yourself, Lola.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone, for joining. Some of you that are members of the OLID community will know me. I am a business analysis coach, and I'm a woman in tech, a woman in STEM, as they also say. I have worked in various capacities in the public sector, private sector. I am the OLID coach when it comes to business analysis. And so I support a lot of immigrants, a lot of people who join the OLID community are also women, and they're all trying to, make a better life for themselves and their careers. And a lot of the work I do is as a coach is also mentoring and encouraging them to overcome a lot of the things that we're going to discuss today, because I have also had to overcome them, or I'm actively overcoming them even as a coach. I don't know it all, so I'm excited to learn today. And when I'm not working at OLID, I also have a brand. It's called It's Super, because I'm a chief superwoman. That's what I call myself, and it's an African inspired brand. It's sold in Whole Foods, Sobeys, and some other retailers in Canada. And it's an Afrofusion line where I bring African foods to the mainstream market. So that's a little bit about me. And don't tell anyone, but I'm also Ade's wife, so I tend to annoy him sometimes.
Oh, mine. I was hoping we'll keep that hush hush, but hey, now everybody knows. Thank you so much, Lola. This is amazing. Yeah. We're excited to have you on the call. By the way, for those who don't know, when we host this roundtable, Lola is in the background helping with production, and we're really happy. We're so glad to have Lola be a co-panelist, a co-moderator on today's call. So we're going to keep going. We're going to get to introduce everybody else. The very first panelist we're going to be introducing on the call today is Elizabeth Phelps. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you, Ade. Feels great to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I know the audience, some folks have heard from you, they've seen your video on LinkedIn, and they've seen your profile. Perhaps do you care to just give us a brief introduction so the audience know who's on the call?
Yes, so I'm a coach. I'm an ICE International Coach Federation certified coach. I am an entrepreneurship, leadership, and career transitions coach. I'm also cultural intelligence specialist, cross-cultural specialist, and I'm the founder of Elizabeth Hess Coaching and Consulting based in Kingston, but I provide my services globally. I wasn't always in this place where I am now today. I came as an immigrant to Canada from India years ago in 1996. And my experiences and my journey, both personal and professional, sort of build the trajectory, career trajectory of where I am today. It was not an easy one, but persistence, patience, perseverance, and a belief in my purpose got me here. I had to transition career many times because, as you know, when you come as an immigrant to a different country, you really need to dig in to not just what you were, but what you can be, and build that resilience over time, and shift into different careers and then find the one that really fits with you. And in 2012, actually, a few things happened, and it made me realize that now is the time that I can create what I believe in is possible for me, as opposed to what I am finding for myself. So I actually left my job, well-paying job, and I entered into the field of entrepreneurship, that is design and arts entrepreneurship, and I knew nothing. So it was all self-learning, and I'm a self-taught entrepreneur. And then it was going very well for myself, and then my health suffered. So in 2018, I had to pivot again. And I entered into the coaching and professional development world. And I had been doing that anyways, volunteering as a business mentor and so on within my community, and working with international graduate students and young entrepreneurs. So it was something that kind of flowed well. And I am today at a place where I feel fulfilled. My work is meaningful. I am able to do what I believe in, which is to help people, to help raise them where you want to be. And of course, I rise with them. I'm very excited to be part of this panel today. And I'm very grateful for Ade and Lola to host us today. And I'm also looking forward to what I can learn from the other panelists, and of course, from you, from your questions. So thank you.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for that very detailed introduction, Elizabeth. Again, we're really excited to have you on the call. We thank you for joining us today. We're going to go to our next panelist. Next panelist I'm going to be introducing today is Esther Joda. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you, Ade. It's really nice to be here. And I'm just going to do a really short introduction of myself. I'm a senior manager, HRBP with TD Bank. But throughout my career, I've worked with a lot of consulting companies. I think too that you would know with PwC, Deloitte. I've also worked in the corporate world. I migrated here 5 years ago, but I've been privileged to work with a lot of senior leaders. And I think that, the topic we're talking about today, I have some knowledge and insights that I'm able to share with you, because I've learned a lot over the last 5 years on how to pretty much integrate into a different environment, leading people with different cultures and also navigating, the Canadian ecosystem as well. And I'm sure you all would learn, from some of the insights that we'll all be sharing today. I'm the lead convener and director of the Nigerian Canadian HR community, where we currently have over 700 members, and we try to help them integrate, into the Canadian ecosystem, mentorship, sponsorship, getting, networks, helping them with resume review, supporting them with interview preps, and all of those. And it's been really amazing, how people have been able to adapt, to a different climate. I have an executive MBA from Ivy Business School. I have a master's degree in HR, but I don't think all of those matter when you're comparing to the experience, that I've gotten with, building relationships with people, leading great people, and also, supporting great leaders across both Canada and Nigeria as well. So I'm really happy to be here today. I'm happy to learn from everyone, and I'm happy to share the insight that I have as well.
Well, thank you so much, Esther. We're really happy to have you on the call as well, and we're excited to learn from you. The thing about this call today is we have different panelists coming with different perspectives, very unique perspectives. And I think everyone on the call will be able to take away something from today's call. And last but not the least, we will introduce our final panelist on the call today is Anuka Bindani. Welcome, Anuka.
Thank you so much, Ade, and hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be in the group today, meeting all of you, kind of hearing questions from you. So as Lola was talking, I actually connect with herself. I consider myself a woman in tech. I have a software background. And as I have taken a career kind of moving onwards in that direction, right now I'm an agile coach, VP Engineering Excellence, working for a Citibank. I have experience working before with Cisco, TD, Capital One in the same capacity. And what I do is I help organizations and teams transform the way they work, bringing more and more agility to the system. And when I talk about agility, I'm a more technical person, so I sometimes talk a little more technical. And agility is changing your mindset, the way you work today. It is a cultural shift and looking at it in a different way, that if things are always done in this way and it has not produced the results that you have envisioned, how could you bring continuous improvement onto it? And as I'm part of various agile communities and I'm talking about the change, I cannot keep myself distance about culturally different teams, as it plays a pivotal role, a very important role to change the culture of how people look at bringing innovation, foster culture of innovation and continuous learning. So through today's discussion, I'm really looking forward to even listen to my co-panelists, and through the questions, how do you guys connect to that feeling, connect to that emotion, and kind of have any experiences that you bring onto the table. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I pass it on to Ade.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anuka. Again, like I said, we have a very diverse group of panelists on the call today, and there will be a lot to take away. Coming from a product, agile background, and your perspective, Anuka, I believe a lot of people on the call today will benefit from it, because we have a community of people that subscribe to the agile coaching and agile learning development. Again, we talked about our next PM roundtable being around agile leadership and developing a product mindset. So that's going to be exciting. We're going to get into the conversation today. The panel conversation we're going to be talking about today at the roundtable is going to be around what the impact of cultural differences amongst teams. We're going to address challenges faced by teams working across different cultures. We're going to discuss strategies to overcome cultural barriers. And we're also going to talk about, obviously, we're celebrating International Women's Month. So we're going to talk about some very critical issues around how women can be supported in navigating the challenges in male-dominated industries, departments, and the importance of male allyship. Now, I'm not going to give it away. We need to hear from the panelists. So let's get right into it. We'll exit this presentation mode. Let's get into this conversation. And I'm really excited. I'm happy with the great group of panelists we have on the call today. And I'm going to pose my first question. I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth. First question for you. As a scholar and expert in learning and development, an expert in cultural learning, what are your thoughts on cultural differences and their impact on teams? You're mute, Elizabeth.
There we are. Thank you for that very important question, Ade. And usually it's a one-hour presentation, so I'm going to cramp it all in the allotted time. And I want to start first with, what is culture? To get clarity on that term. Culture as we know it is really an ongoing negotiation and learning about our patterned beliefs, our traditions, our norms, our values, attitudes, behaviors, and expectations over time. Culture is also something that we are born into, and we do not imbibe it externally. It's like a code embedded within us. It does evolve over time. It is influenced also by our nationality, our ethnicity, our regional background, our racial background, our gender, religion, sexual orientation, and our ability, disability, and invisible disabilities, plus class. So we look at the rest of the world and everything around us, we perceive it through this very intimate and very specific cultural lens and our intersectionality. And that is something that defines the whole world for us. So it's a very subjective perspective. And why do we do that? Neuroscience research has explained to us that it comes from an evolutionary approach to conserve energy, because it takes our brains far less energy and calories to recognize familiar patterns around us and to access them where they are stored inside our brains, as opposed to recognizing unfamiliar patterns. So for example, if we are in a room where we are surrounded by people from all kinds of backgrounds, exhibiting various different kinds of behaviors and being present with their respective values, it makes us uncomfortable. That's not where we want to be. Also, we will seek out like-minded, similar values, similar looking individuals, because that's just our default mode. And within organizations and within teams, in today's day and age, diversity is the buzzword for talent acquisition and for representing the organization and the values that organizations stand for. But what needs to be present before diversity can work? What framework needs to be in place? What leadership, how should leadership be present? So when leadership is not present with a certain framework, or educated, informed, and able to transfer that down to team members and employees, then what happens? We see cultural dissonance. That is inevitable. So there can be a buildup between team members, frustration, resentment, mistrust, lack of communication, which can relate to and create a lack of collaboration, connection, and of course, ultimately performance suffers. This can also create burnout, in managers and team members, and especially minority team members, because you can be up against a whole bunch of other things, and loss of talent ultimately. During the pandemic and even today, most of my clients come to me not because they're unhappy with their job on the whole, or that they're not satisfied with the pay scale and extra benefits, but because they are burnt out and because they have become invisible and undervalued. So this is, of course, the pandemic that we are not seeing, or the epidemic that we are not seeing. Other than this, othering can happen within teams, and there can be judgment, there can be unconscious biases and assumptions made about cultures other than yours. We can also see that ethnocentrism can be present, which is the dominant members of the dominant cultural group perceiving the members of the minority group within the teams as inferior or of lesser value, because they do not know. It could come from a place of not knowing. And again, that creates a lack of belonging and confusion and chaos. And it's not a place where we want to be. So what is the solution? So I have this formula that I provide to my clients and organizational leaders. It's EQ plus CQ plus ICC is equal to effective diverse teams. So what is the formula? Let's break it down. EQ, as we know, it is emotional intelligence. It is our ability to increase our self-awareness, which is very important. And it is also our ability to notice our own emotions and behaviors in comparison to others and be able to adjust them accordingly in response to those in the room and at the table. Improving on this ability, of course, increases our cultural empathy. And I cannot emphasize on this, enough, that cultural empathy is so required, to open doors to communication, between agendas, between people from different religions, between people from different cultures, backgrounds, and hold space and time to listen, to pause, to listen, and that builds connection and familiarity. The next is CQ. CQ is cultural intelligence. This is a capability that, again, we can improve upon, and it is our capability to relate to and function effectively in diverse cultural and multicultural settings. It builds our skill set for cultural agility. And when we are culturally agile, we are able to clue into the nonverbal and contextual cues. So for example, the facial expressions, the body language of people from other cultures without constantly finding ourselves at a loss. So this capability is very important to understand first and then to implement. The last but not the least is intercultural communication competency. And fundamentally, all relationships, whether personal or professional, is built on our capacity to effectively communicate. And that is what ICC is about, being able to effectively and appropriately communicate in diverse cultural settings and build those meaningful connections. So beyond this, what can we do? Of course, build our listening skills, our active listening skills, be able to be present for others, to understand that we need to work together as a team to create a sense of belonging. But it's all very well to talk about solutions, but who gets to implement them? At the team level, at the organizational level, what needs to be present? Who is accountable for this? So team members and new hire cannot be expected to have their EQ, CQ, and ICC skill sets at the level that will help support diverse teams at work. So ongoing training, professional development programs, coaching, mentoring, and assessments are important, but they are not enough. So who is really accountable? And here the onus really lies on leadership, top down. When leadership is aware of what can work and is able to not only implement it, but be an example with their own behaviors and getting responsible and accountable, that's when the organizational work culture really shifts. And when that happens and is in place, it's fantastic. We have cultural harmony, and everything is working well. And, performance is being affected positively and everyone is happy. The revenue projections are happening. Everyone is happy. When we are able to implement all of this and create that shift in workplace culture and create that workplace culture strategy, we are able to create belonging, a sense of belonging on many levels. And when that is possible, we are able to also bring inside cultural equilibrium within teams. And then only we are able to reap the benefits of diversity within the team environment and within organizations. Wow. It's not rocket science. It is possible, but we have to work towards it. And it's never too late. We can do it.
Wow. Excellent. Absolutely remarkable. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. There's a lot to unpack from what you shared, and I'm just learning, and there's a lot to take away. Emotional intelligence, self-awareness, cultural empathy, ICC, intercultural communication competency. How do we ensure that we build an active listening skill, and belonging is extremely important. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm going to pass it on to my co-host, co-moderator, Lola, to take on the next question.
Yeah, thanks, Ade. So, I would say, I'd love to go to you, Esther, for the next question. And the question is, what your thoughts are on, today's corporate culture and its impact on women's experiences in the workplace. As an HR expert, I'm sure you have direct experiences, indirect, on how you even help within your organization to improve or that impact, be it positive or negative. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a very great question, Ola. The corporate world is transforming every day, and we haven't gotten to where we need to be, but I think we've been making progress daily, right? Over the last 8 years, we've seen some increase in the representation of women in the workplace, but I could still say that we're dramatically underrepresented, especially women of color. And I say this across levels, but most importantly in leadership positions. There was a research by McKinsey recently, I think it was 2022, that shows that only 1 in 4 C-suite leaders is a woman, and only 1 in 20 is a woman of color. Now that reminds me of a friend who worked as an executive in a leading tech company, where we have more men than women, or we used to have more men than women. I think it's still the same today. She's super smart, she had high achievements, but there was nothing she ever said that made sense to her peers or a manager, right? She got so frustrated at some point and she started to doubt her capabilities. Most times she would probably have to go back to achievements just to be sure that she's still smart and she still had great ideas. She ended up believing that she was a diversity hire. And after 8 months or 9 months thereabouts, she left the organization to a bigger role, bigger company. And I can say that she's doing exploits today. So from my experience, I realized that most organizations focus only on diversity. And by diversity, I mean increasing the number of women, people of color, people with disability, and other forms of intersectionality, neglecting the place of inclusion. And that's where culture comes in. Because inclusion is creating that environment and that culture for diverse talent to thrive and succeed. And so in today's world, we deal with a lot of bias. And Elizabeth mentioned a couple earlier today that has really created negative experiences for women in the workplace. I've seen a lot of this happen over my career, where we promote men ahead of women. And I hear some leaders say, I want someone who is available, someone who can travel. And I think that this particular woman has a lot, she has kids, she won't be able to travel and do all of those. I've also seen unequal pay, for similar work. And I'm sure most of us have seen that, where you see that for the same job, you're hiring a man for that job and you pay higher than you pay for the woman, right? Another thing that I've seen as well is, the focus on how we invest. We invest in developing capability of men, including sponsorship, mentorships, and, we're like, it has executive presence. I don't think, she has executive presence. So I really want to spend my investment of this. And I really don't know what executive presence means, like in the real sense. And we see a lot of bias. Recently, I was in a leadership meeting and I heard, a man came up to, talk about some idea. And they were like, oh, that's amazing. That's great. I think, this is the idea of the century. We need to go ahead with this. But I remember that weeks before, there was another woman that came up with something even more, better than that idea. And then she was asked to go revisit it and, test with other people, test with other, so to speak, men. There's so many, other forms of microaggression that we see in the workplace that has really been impacting women. So, this and more creates, barriers. And in the professional world, it's called the broken rung that prevents women from enhancing their careers, feeling a comparable sense of belonging and confidence to grab that seat at the table and own it, right? It is sad, to be honest, but it's the reality. And so women are having to do more to be recognized and rewarded, in the workplace or, in any environment they find themselves. And so what I would say is that for future forward organizations, they need to begin to pay attention to this, because honestly, women bring a lot to the table that men do. And I would say much more, because women are known, based on research from a lot of top consulting companies, that women are better with decision making and also better leadership. But like I said, it's just the sad reality. And as we talk today, I'm sure that we'll get to the point where we'll say, start talking about what you need to do irrespective of all these limitations that you find in the workplace.
Wow, that's like fantastic, because a lot of the points that you raised are things that I have also found, even as a woman in tech. The statistics are really low for minority women as well, and just in tech in general. So, and I want to tie this even into my cultural background as a Nigerian or African woman. And I'm going to tie that into the question I'm going to ask Anuka, who also in the recent years moved to Canada. And a lot of things that I found that when I started working in the corporate world, I would be afraid to ask questions, because as an African woman in a room with men, I've been taught culturally that I am not on par with a man. And so that confidence to ask questions, that confidence to go forward to my boss and bring up ideas, I had to unlearn that cultural mindset that I had been taught as a woman, right? That my place was to care for the man, care for the children, care for the house. And here I am in a room full of men bringing up ideas. So I want to ask you, Anuka, how do you think cultural differences affect team communication, innovation, and decision-making for women in the workplace?
Thank you for the question, Lola. As I was hearing from Elizabeth and Esther, I could not agree more, and even you, I could not agree more. The points, the observations that all of you brought in terms of a culturally different team up. It's a beautiful intersection and collaboration of people coming from a different religion, a different language, even different grades, different scales of educational background. And when a team constitutes of such diverse set of people, you could imagine their ability to communicate, their ability to collaborate, perceive information, digest and kind of make sense out of it can be very, very different. Just to talk about the way we communicate, it is heavily dominant by the way we had been always doing it in a certain way, or some people are more direct and to the point, whereas some people can be really subtle and indirect. That's the style of communication every individual brings to the table. And when there are a set of different people, they're working together and they're kind of relying on different communication approach, it can be both. It can give you different results. It can be uplifting, it can be opening for somebody who has not thought about, okay, something can be perceived through this lens, whereas this might also cause confusion, not connecting to the information coming. Somebody typically like to say indirectly, but even if it's valuable, but they always say it indirectly. And the team member is not able to connect to that information. And this happens a lot in our workplaces as we individuals work with each other. We have seen this a lot. Coming back to communication, and which we heavily rely on communication, and we gather data, we perceive data, and using our own unique values, experiences, background, we arrive on certain decision making. And when a set of people work together, they might go on a divergent way of approaching this data. And as we all know, we are what our experiences are, what our backgrounds are. So working together, they might either come to a very divergent approach, a very creative, innovative way of doing things. And certain people might just rely heavily on data-driven, evidence-proved information. And when you bring all of those aspects together, you are bound to build a solution that's really can impact your business, that can really impact the way you operate. And very recently, I have been reading a very interesting article on The Economist that culturally different teams tend to behave better market solutions, better business solutions, because they have the capability to see different aspects. When they see information, the way I read it and I narrate a story about itself can be very, very different from somebody else who is narrating a different story. And it might be sometimes feel that you are going through that journey. In the beginning, it might feel it's confusing. It's the sense of belonging, it's yet not established, but we have to remember that it's a journey. It has to be nurtured. It has to be developed over time. And as Elizabeth was very correctly mentioned, leadership, mid-management, executive leadership really plays a pivotal role in shaping this culture, shaping this journey. Putting together a diverse team, they are encouraging people to listen to each other, see all aspects when they are bringing a solution or a kind of creating a solution. And leadership sometimes they can educate, they can kind of conduct trainings to make people aware that it is okay if somebody tells a thing differently. At this point, his experience is talking. Maybe you guys should have more one-on-one conversations to kind of understand each other. And that's where your communications will be much smoother. So and I really say that putting together a team is just not enough. You have to nurture them, you have to inculcate the behavior, and leadership definitely can devise different strategies, how they can connect these relationships building. We live in a world of where different cultures celebrate different festivities. So maybe it's a moment to celebrate those moments, come out strong and kind of encourage each other to kind of personally take interest to understand your peers. So it's definitely, it is something that we can develop over time, but keep faith in yourself, be vocal. If you do not have access to certain information that's holding you back, be vocal, be narrative, and that can take you really far in the journey.
Well, thanks, Anuka. And you know what you talked about, even within the team and the dynamics and leadership. It reminds me of an example of a time when I was working in a bank, and one of my teammates saw the VP. I was like, "Oh, you're going for a smoke? Okay, let's go for a smoke together." I'm like, "She's going for a smoke with the VP. I don't want to be seen by the VP. I just want to be in my cubicle, work." And I thought she was so bold, you know, but from that chat, those smoke breaks she took with the VP, before I knew she was a senior manager, right? Because she was Canadian and she grew up in a culture where she felt like he's a VP, so he's a human being. I don't have to feel like I can't be confident. And I learned a lot from watching people who succeed, even as women. And I don't have to smoke to socialize with the VP, but I can find areas of interest and have conversations. And I think, you know, you really hit the nail on the head, Anuka, about also leaders who are also encouraging to women to be able to have conversations and having that open door communication. But I think it's also important to not just watch leaders, but also watch other women that are successful and, you know, copy what they're doing in certain ways. So thanks so much, Anuka. Ade, back to you.
Well, thank you, Lola. And thanks to all the panelists. Now, I want to share something quickly. I do have a concern. And my concern is we might not be able to get through all the questions. This is amazing. This is some real conversation we're having on the call today. And the only concern we have is we might not be able to get to all the questions, but it's a good problem to have because the conversation is interesting, is informative, and is very educated. So we thank all the panelists. Now, as we keep going, we also want to encourage all the participants to chime in. We want to hear from you. Please post your questions through the chats. We'll go through the questions at the next round. We'll love to hear from you. But before we get to that, I'm going to go to our next panelist, Esther. This question is for you. And question is, we've talked about some of the challenges we face, but, can we dive right into it, deeper into it? What are some of the challenges teams face when working across different cultures? And part one, part two, how can organizations address gender-based biases and discrimination in the workplace?
Thanks, Ade. That's a packed question. And I would say that, Lola, that example you gave earlier is super amazing because we've seen that happen a lot in the workplace, right? And I'll probably talk about that a bit as I'm answering this question around, when you're from different, cultures, the expectations when you come into a multicultural team is really different, right? But first, I would like to emphasize that multicultural teams are known to achieve more, right? I know that you mentioned that earlier, but to derive a successful outcome, you need to put in more work, more effort, and the right strategy in place. I'm Nigerian, and there's a saying that to cook a very tasty meal, you have to spend money, right? Personally, I see culture differences beyond heritage. Each home has a different culture, irrespective of heritage. And as such, each team is made up of people with different mindset, belief systems, way of life, and expectations of others as well, which in itself is hard. Now, when you layer different customs, it makes it tougher to manage. And from my experience, some of the challenges that I've seen with multicultural teams, first is language barrier, right? An example will be accent. We all have accents, like there's a British accent, there's an American accent, but we all have accents. And so it is hard to understand what you're not used to, right? Sometimes you go into a conversation and then you think you're actually communicating, but people don't understand what you're saying because they're not used to your accent, right? So that's one of the barriers that we've seen. There's also conflicting, working styles, communication styles that could lead to some form of misunderstanding of intentions, controversy about certain issues. You could communicate in a way, and that's one thing that I learned, migrating to Canada is, when Nigerians speak, they're very bold and vocal about it. If you're angry, people know you're angry because you communicate that, right? But here, even when you're angry, you say with a smile, right? And so if you're like, I'm not even angry, I'm just telling you how it is, but someone else feels like, oh, I think she was really nasty, right? So there could be some misunderstanding around intentions. And then articulation of thoughts, in a way where others would understand is also a big deal. And so for those whose primary language isn't English, we tend to translate our language into English when we're speaking. And that sometimes leads to some form of rambling or non-concise articulation of thoughts. And I've seen that a lot. And that's not just because you're from another country. I see those whose primary English is French also have those issues. Elizabeth talked earlier about, cultural stereotypes. Oh, she's Black, and so she might not be smart, or she's Indian, she might be bossy, right? People just have those cultural stereotypes, unconscious bias. And so when you come into a team, you realize that automatically people already have a bias. And so it's hard to collaborate. Colleagues from some cultures may be less likely to get their voices heard as well. And I'll give an example. So I started my career back in Nigeria, and you're not expected to speak when in a meeting with your manager or your leaders, except you're asked to. You don't even brag about your achievements because people call you pride. But in other clients like North America, we can see that a lot here, you're expected to contribute, like no matter how small. When you think about something, you say it. And you also need to talk about all the things that you do. Otherwise, no one will know what you're doing. And so you see teams of people, where some people don't say anything. One of the leaders that I really respect in this space said that the most quiet person usually has the best ideas, right? And so as a manager, to create that culture of inclusiveness, you have to intentionally spend time understanding the differences, leveraging the strengths and improving on some of those gaps so you can foster collaboration and team growth. Organizations, managers need to be intentional about it, understanding the root cause of bias and discrimination. just so that we can change the belief systems of people. I learned recently as well that belief systems drive behaviors, and then behaviors drive results. And I see that in this space a lot. We focus on changing behaviors. We teach diversity. We try to teach inclusiveness in the workplace, and we expect an outcome. But we forget that belief systems are there. That's where the culture comes in, where we have to intentionally change those belief systems that we're all the same, that we're all human. And that's the cause of, most of the concerns that we see in the workplace. The only differences that we have is in our backgrounds, our personalities, our life experiences that brings color to life. And the best analogy that I've been able to come up with, when you go to a store, say a Louis Vuitton store, for example, and you go to buy, say, sneakers, you probably see the same sneaker, you see different colors, red, green, blue, white. The quality of that shoe is the same. The price of that shoe is the same. You only see different colors because of variety. And so imagine a world where we all wore white every day for the rest of our lives, or we all wear yellow for the rest of our lives. It's going to be so boring. And that's what diversity brings. Different colors, different ideas, different personality brings some form of creativity, innovation, brings sunshine to the world, because life would be boring if we're all the same. And so as a leader or as a manager or as a team member, because we also have those unconscious bias about other people, when we work in a team where there are different people, with different backgrounds, we need to understand that we're pretty much all the same. And you have to learn about those different cultures, about the different personalities. Otherwise, you wouldn't reap the outcome of diversity in the workplace or even in your personal life as well.
Well, thank you so much, Esther. I think that's amazing. And I love that example around different colors of sneakers. And if there's a world where we all wear white every day, it's going to be boring. We need to embrace diversity, different colors, and why we're here. And I think also one of the key takeaways is from a leadership standpoint, being intentional around understanding the root cause of the differences that people face. And I think the only way to make changes is to be aware. And, again, there's a lot to unpack. In the interest of time, we're just going to keep moving. Thank you. Thank you so much, Esther. I'm going to pass it back to you, Lola.
Thanks, Ade. So the next question is going to go to Anuka, and I like to insert a bit of my personal experiences as well when I'm asking questions, because as we all know, working as a woman in the workplace, I've experienced some of these things. So a story that I experienced as well is as a Nigerian. One of my coworkers, and this question is in regards to unconscious bias. He had said, "Oh, you're Nigerian. Okay, you're not like the other Nigerians that or Nigerian that I worked with at the last workplace. He didn't understand boundaries, and he was always preaching to me, and always like." And I thought, oh, he meant well, but he's Nigerian, and sometimes he's a new immigrant, and sometimes the way that things are handled in Nigeria, maybe he didn't understand the boundaries. And he was like, "Oh, you're not like the other Nigerian I've worked with." And to me, I had to kind of explain the cultural difference to him. And he was like, "Oh, okay, I see that." And in my head, I was like, that is a situation where if he was a hiring manager and he knew the person was maybe African or Nigerian, that might be a bias that could affect somebody else's opportunity. So to you, Anuka, my question is, what role does unconscious bias play in corporate culture, and how can it be addressed to create more inclusive environment for women? And we have some men here on the panel today, but today we're focused on women, but I'm sure whatever example you give will apply to everyone, and especially when it comes to leadership positions, because somebody could be brilliant at what they do, but there's some unconscious bias that can affect them getting what they deserve. Sorry, you're on mute, Anuka.
I'm sorry. Okay. So yeah, thank you for your question, Lola. And for the moment, I'm completely engrossed with the thought that Esther just left us with, that how boring the world would be if everybody looks alike. So with that, I'm gonna probably focus more on the question, unconscious bias, and especially with respect to it's we're talking about women in leadership positions. So it's not a new thing. We all had been talking about, Esther mentioned in a very nice way. Unconscious bias comes into play, comes and becomes really dominant in many organizations. And one of the ways, stereotyping, you just mentioned the other Nigerian Open, stereotyping people, stereotyping a community, that they showcase, they kind of demonstrate a specific behavior when it is about perceiving a specific role. And it's about when leadership and women going kind of aspiring to leadership positions, a lot times it being talked about that because of their personality, they are incompetent. Because of their personal commitments, they might not be able to spend the amount of time this role would require. And at this position, this is the unconscious bias speaking, who probably did either the stereotype, they are being judgmental, or who did not have the exposure to see how phenomenal a woman can be in a leadership position. I work for an organization, we have a woman CEO. I have heard her speaking. I know her personal life. Her husband left his flourishing job to support her. And this is how we want men to behave. As women, we want to be part of organizations, those celebrate us, those elevate us, not tolerate us, that we are here and they have diverse commitment, they have kids, or maybe younger women, maybe they're planning for their family, so they will not be available. So they should not be elevated up to a leadership position, which would require a much more time commitment for them. So there are definitely, this is, and some organization has driven through this journey, some has created being exemplary to kind of handle this issue, and some are probably on the way. Couple of things I've seen organization do to kind of deal with this kind of mindset, to change it, that more than women, it's men who is aligned with women partners, elevate them in their own circle. In the culture of leadership, they kind of nominate peers to certain roles and kind of promote them, that I believe that this woman would be perfect for such roles. But to land on such kind of mindset, we would need to be aware, organization need to go through specific trainings, leadership trainings, and need to know that what skills and abilities women can bring that will impact their organization culture, their ability to deliver business, and maybe creating social economic values. In smaller terms, organizations nowadays, I'm seeing their on-site daycares that gives new mothers to bring their child to office and still be connected, still be fully 100% available. There are leadership programs that women themselves can go through and gather that extra confidence that I'm as good as to apply to a role where I think a male person could kind of land on this role. So these are some of the ways that organizations should kind of attend to unconscious bias, being aware, acknowledge, and that this may be an unconscious bias. So there are training materials nowadays. There are individual personalized educations to recognize that this can be an unconscious bias, because a lot of time people probably do not know when they are kind of showing that behavior, they do not recognize this can be unconscious behavior.
I love that. And I think it's really vital that leaders in all organizations continuously learn and train themselves, because sometimes we don't even realize we all have biases that we don't even realize about other cultures. And it's in the media, it's in everything we do. We joke about it, there's comedy about it, but it seeps into the corporate world. And so we have to, just be conscious about our unconscious biases. So thanks so much, Anuka. Ade, you can go ahead, please.
Thank you, Lola. And I just want to recognize that we do have a question in the chat. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing that very, very important question. Before we go to the Q&A, I have one question for you, Elizabeth. And it's still surrounding the conversation we're having. And we know as women of color, cultural backgrounds shape the way we perceive some of the conversation we've been talking about and approach things, even cultural values, norms, and experiences, as you shared earlier, influences our communication style, decision-making, leadership style. So question for you is, as a woman of color, how does your cultural background affect how you perceive and approach things in your professional career? Part one. Part two of the question is, how can women be encouraged and supported to speak up and have their voices heard in the workplace? Elizabeth?
That's a profound question, Ade. Let me begin with culture again. And what I want everyone to reflect on is their individual cultures, the cultures that they were born into. Women of color tend to be born into cultures that are often collectivist cultures, high power distance cultures with an emphasis on feminine values and energies. And here is not gender, but more so values, so nurturing, caring, and so on. And this can embed cultural codes within us that go deep down into our identity. So let me explain what collectivist culture is and what high power distance culture is. In a collectivist culture, the focus is the collective identity of the family, both nucleus and extended family, the social group, the community, the company, the nation, and so on, which is great for support and creating an environment of an identity that you can relate to as an individual. But what happens to the individual identity here is it tends to get slightly diminished, where your voice and your value and your place in society is in relation to something else most of the time, as opposed to individualistic cultures where it is really focused on the individual and the individual gets to decide most things in his or her life, as opposed to having to depend on family, depend on social groups and community for permission. So that's what collectivist culture is. This in women manifests as that we are present in a more supportive role, in a more giving and nurturing role. When we see the other parameter, cultural dimension, high power distance, what is high power distance? It is really regarding and respecting those in authority. So parents is the first step, teachers, elders, lawmakers, politicians, your boss, your manager, the executive leadership, and of course, heads of state and political figures. In respecting and regarding them as authority figures and looking up to them, not at them, we tend to create a hierarchical distance. And this, in turn, creates, for the individual, and men and women, create a situation where our voices are diminished and our presence is diminished, and we may have hesitation and often also resistance. For example, to ask for pay increase, to ask for that well-deserved job promotion. So as much as culture can be very good for us, it can also limit us. So to come with that understanding and to come with that, information that culture can put you in a good place and culture can also put you in a not so good place. So as a woman, to understand your embedded cultural codes and where is that putting you? Where is that placing you? Is that doing you good or is that pulling you down? Very important reflection. Second is to understand that if you are a new immigrant or your parents have been immigrant, how is your original culture that you were born into comparing with your adopted culture? For example, here in Canada, where we are more individualistic, where we have a low power distance, where we are direct in our communication. So really to reflect on that, no judgment. And the last but not the least, especially for women and especially for women of color, to understand that you could be up against a system of prejudice, of discrimination, of judgment, assumptions, unconscious biases, which are all out of your control. They're not within your control. And you did not create them. So you're not at fault with anything. So to understand that, but also to realize that you may not have a choice here, but you do have a choice here. You can choose to rise above that in small or large measures and make decisions for yourself and overcome those challenges in nano steps at a time. And how are you going to do it? That is your individual commitment to yourself. And what I'm going to share next is really a plan to raise your confidence, which has worked with myself and which works with my clients. So the first and foremost is to accept yourself. To accept yourself as you are, because you are whole, you are complete, you are enough, and you are powerful. There is power in each one of us. All it needs is a key to unlock it. Then, very important here is to believe in yourself. Because if you do not care and dare to believe in yourself, you can't ask anyone else to believe in you. You can't get allyship. You can't get and access the mentor that you need. So first and foremost, to believe in yourself and to believe in the value that you bring to the workplace. And then is to define your purpose in your personal, professional life, and your goals. Your purpose is going to be a North Star. Your purpose is going to be the light in that dark, dark road ahead of you. If you don't have that figured out, you ain't going to go anywhere. Next is check in with your fears and limiting beliefs. This I cannot lay emphasis enough. We think of our fears and of our limiting beliefs as weaknesses. No, we need to remove the curtain on our fears and limiting beliefs. Check in as to why it's there, and you'll be surprised at the story that will raise your strength once you're able to do that. And I request you not to do this alone. Do it with someone you can trust, whoever that may be, whoever is accessible to you. That is a very important step. And then share your story. And I've already heard this, and you have heard this from the other panelist, from Lola, that we need to share our stories, whether it's one-on-one, whether it is with a group of colleagues, peers, whether in panel discussions like this, because your story is unique and not repeated by anyone else. And you need to celebrate yourself, the small wins, the big wins, the small losses, the big losses, and be present from a place of truth and authenticity. So you are able to walk ahead with whatever is dear to you. And as you are present in that way, you liberate and you free your voice. And that is the best place to be. So be persistent, be patient. Don't give up, because you are unstoppable. So with that said, what are the practical tips, right? What I like to say is that understand first that your voice is connected to your breath and to your emotions. So you can only be present with a voice that resonates first with yourself, and then you can resonate with others with your voice. So watch your breath. When we take shallow breaths, we are stressed out. So watch your emotions. Take those deep breaths, practice your breath, and then practice speaking with your breath. And that is going to support you. Practice. You are going to hear this word repeatedly as I answer this question. Practice in front of the mirror. Practice in your car. Practice recording your voice on your iPhone video camera. Practice recording your voice on the app that is your voice memo on your iPhone. We are not used to, and especially to all the women gathered in this place, we do not hear our voice enough. Not in our daily conversations, but our powerful voice, where it comes from our strengths. We don't hear ourselves that way. When I started my coach training, that was the biggest hurdle for me. So it is all possible. We are able to improve upon our voice, but we need to do these things. And last but not least, continue that practice by joining whatever you can join, maybe a meetup group, maybe a Toastmasters club, maybe a local board or charity that you can help, and you can have your voice at the table and speak. And this will give you practice. So practice makes perfect, and practice also increases our confidence. And with all this in place, you are going to become unstoppable and be able to walk into any room and resonate with everyone with your voice. Thank you. Ade.
Wow, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Everything you shared was so profound, so just like music to my ears. It's really important that we believe in ourselves, because if we must go out and perform and we want others to believe in us, we must first believe in ourselves. And you laid down the foundation. I mean, foundation is, we have to have our core values, what inspires us, what motivates us, and have your purpose, your driving force, and share your story. I think the one that you shared that is really profound, that I find really remarkable, is everything is amazing, by the way, is recording, practice speaking to yourself in the mirror, recording your own voice. Not a lot of people listen to themselves. I listen to myself. I try it because it does help me, helps my confidence. And again, thank you so much, Elizabeth. This is amazing. We're almost out of time here. We're gonna get to a question from the participants. Lola, I'm gonna pass it on to you, and then we're gonna move on to the key takeaways.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ade. I was just gonna say that, Elizabeth, I don't know if you've been told, but your voice is so soothing. I felt like I was being hypnotized, and I forgot that I had a job here. So so you have a really soothing voice. Just wanted to let you know that. So we have a question from Catherine Bell, and she says, I teach second-year computer programming students, domestic and international, and put them into teams for a research presentation for career strategy project. They have already spent a year together, so they have formed biases. Some teams have not gelled. I depend on a team lead to bring them to the team together. Do you have a suggestion on how to train the team leads very quickly to sensitize their teams to the need to be culturally sensitive? That's a great question. And I know that Elizabeth and Esther had provided some feedback in the chat. So I don't know if anybody else any other panelists was to just chime in a little bit, but obviously in a concise way, just so that we save time.
It probably would be different from what I said in the chat. Shed somewhat light on that. And I would say, because I just went through that as well in my class of leaders. And like I said, you'd expect that leaders should know better. But we found that it was hard to gel for some teams. And so what we kind of did within ourselves to kind of help people come together was to ensure that we created some form of empathy. Like, empathy plays a large role, or a big role, even personally in your home, at work. You need to create that form of empathy. And so what we had done was to, bring people together and share stories. People go through a lot. Like, you probably would think this person is doing well, but they also go through some form of discrimination at some point. And to people share stories about their background, it could just be nothing negative. It could be something positive about their background, what the expectations are of life, where they're at now, right? And so people, when you listen to other people, you know that we're all going through this together, right? And although you find some people that also think that I'm better off, than everyone because I've had better opportunities, I've had the privilege to go to the best schools, to work in the best organizations, I'm the top executive, I don't have any of these problems, this person isn't smart, or this person, I shouldn't be talking to this person, right? Or even biases that have been created based on relationship during probably work that you've done together. But, you could also invite like a DEI specialist that would come and have conversations around why you are not better than every other person. You're just different. And that's why that is great. Sharing those insights, really help the team. I wouldn't say we achieved 100% because the world is changing every day. We're getting there. And like I said earlier, the way it was 20, 30 years ago, we've improved a lot. We've moved the dial a lot. And so you probably wouldn't get it 100%, but at least when people have that empathy for other people, I understand that, I'm not different from this person and I have to accommodate other people. If we really want to achieve the best outcome from this relationship that we have, and just because I'm doing well today or because I appear smart today, doesn't mean that tomorrow I'll be smart as well. This other person could be in a position where I would need to have, have conversations with this person or lean on that person's or leverage that person's network and all of those. So that really helped the team, and you can pretty much do that as well.
I might want to add just a thing for me, always personal connections, relationships, and trust had brought out the best in people. And again, on a technical world, and I think Catherine teaches computer programming. In Agile world, we call something about pair programming. The two people sit together and work. So maybe pair people and encourage them to develop their personal bonds, listen to each other, develop the relationship. And as Esther was rightly mentioned, what is being shown on your face and what you are going under through. We all are like ducks, showing a calm face on the upfront and still pedaling like crazy underneath. So it needed people to understand each other and be empathetic, that at this moment somebody is behaving in a certain way because he might be going through a lot at the background. And that kind of that creates trust, that creates lifelong friendship, and they are going to elevate. This is going to snowballing effect. If it starts with two people, create influence amongst the whole group.
Awesome, thanks, Anuka. So Ade, I think we can go to the next round of questions, and I hope that answers. Hope all those the feedback helps, Catherine.
Lola, I just want to interject here very quickly. Catherine, thank you so much for attending. Lovely to see you here. I quickly want to add to what my other panelists have mentioned and explained, both Anuka and Esther, is that when you see this cultural adhesion happening where people from the same group are sticking together, yes, there is a lot of challenges and stress that they are facing. They are not able to really commit that time and effort into wanting to integrate with people from other cultures. So you get these subgroups within the class, but there is a way to segue into cultural resonance instead of dissonance. It is by first doing it in a step-by-step way, and your team leads here can lead the way. The one-on-one conversations are a great start, but that may not be possible within a class setting. So as a group, if everyone gets vulnerable and starts sharing their story, and everyone can notice the common human thread going through the class, through those stories, and understand that we may look different, behave different, and be present with our differences, but there are similarities that we can connect with. At the end of the day, we're all humans. We need to connect with our humanity. And that is the fundamental approach that we need to, work towards wherever we are, whatever we are doing professionally, within our work, within our communities, in academia, wherever we are in healthcare. So if that is possible, storytelling is very important. Who's going to go first? Who is going to become vulnerable first? Who is able to bridge that gap first? Are your team leaders comfortable doing that? Do they need a little bit of mentoring and coaching to be able to, facilitate that with the rest of the class? So that may be a good place to start. And also to, some may not want to tell stories, and that's okay, but they will have heard. So that empathy, cultural empathy, will begin somewhere.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you for Catherine for raising that question. Fun fact: Catherine and I connected on LinkedIn, and we had a few conversations around connecting, and it's nice to meet you. And we shared the fact that we connected through Elizabeth. She referenced Elizabeth being a good friend. So we're great to see you on the call, Catherine. As we move on, it's not over yet, people. Again, we're having so much fun that unfortunately we won't be able to get through the last round of questions. But what we'll do instead is we'll collect the last round of questions, perhaps, maybe not, or just we're going to use the opportunity to give all the panelists an opportunity to give us a key takeaway, give us their key takeaways, tips, strategies, and advice for everyone on the call, in collating everything that we've been talking about. And we're going to start with you first, Anoka. If you can just share some key takeaways for the audience today. Yeah.
Absolutely. For me, the first thing that starts with is that I trust everybody, that everybody coming with a good intention. Everybody here is to show that they are magnificent. Nobody wants to stay mediocre. So trust your teams with that belief, and the more and more awareness with leadership, with leadership can be started, but it starts with you. And this is where I'm coming back to Elizabeth's emphasis that it starts with you. Be vulnerable, be vocal, and do not hesitate to ask those questions that makes people uncomfortable. You challenge status quo and create a space for yourself.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Anoka, and thank you so much for joining us today at today's roundtable. We really, really appreciate it. I will go to you next, Esther, and Olola, I'm going to come to you as well. Now that we're doing the key takeaways, perhaps as a co-host, you can also share your thoughts as a woman on the subject. So we're going to go to you next, Esther. Key takeaways, if you're going to recap everything we've talked about, perhaps plus any other thoughts that you have, in about 2 minutes, share something.
All right, great. I'm going to try to keep it within 2 minutes. We've talked a lot about challenges and limitations today, but a couple of things that I wanted to highlight is, to succeed in this environment, irrespective of all these limitations that we cannot control. We've talked about believing in yourself, like we kind of overemphasize it. Tell yourself every day how awesome you are, how much you deserve to be where you are and where you want to be as well. It is the toughest thing, but you have to do it. Move past imposter syndrome. And, this is pretty much tied to believing in yourself. No matter how much we achieve as women, we believe we're not enough. We doubt ourselves, we doubt our skills, our accomplishments. I gave that example earlier about that woman in tech. And so you need to move past, that syndrome to believe in yourself. Most importantly, do not focus just on the value that you bring on board. Build the right connections, the relationship and networks. It's easier to say, my work will speak for me. It can to some extent, but as you begin to, move within roles or rise to leadership roles, you realize quickly that what brought you there would not take you to the next level. build the right relationships, people that can speak for you, when you are not there. That's very important. Share your thoughts and your ideas and be strategic about it. Do not feel intimidated. Be pleasant, but be assertive. You realize quickly that your ideas are very valuable. Blow your horn as often as you can. Talk about the great things that you've done. If you don't talk about it, people will not know, right? Lastly, make a list of what you want to be known for, right? And paint that picture in the workplace. I'm not saying paint a different person. You need to build your brand, but make sure that it's in alignment with what you stand for. Build your brand, make that list, and that's how you should go. If you're in an organization or in a team that is toxic and you begin to doubt yourself, it is time to move on. You need to protect your mental space. That is very important. And remember that you bring a different lens to the table, which every organization needs to be successful, especially in times like this. Be proud of who you are. And lastly, what I'll say is that life isn't fair. The world isn't just. To be successful in life, you need to control what you can and leave what you cannot. But in all, work smart, build the right and genuine relationships, live your values, build your brand, chase your dreams, and most importantly, believe in yourself.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Esther. We really, really appreciate you joining us at the roundtable today. Those are some really, really powerful takeaways. It feels like we didn't talk about imposter syndrome. I think perhaps we've been talking about something similar. We've been talking about it, but not necessarily mentioned. I think that's exceptionally, some exceptional takeaways there. Relationships are key. And as you said, make a list of the things that you want to be known for. That's really, really super. We're gonna go to you next, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, perhaps you've shared a lot to us with us on the call today. Lots of insights, lots of profound ideas. What are some of the key takeaways that you like participants to leave here with today?
So I first want to acknowledge what Anuka and Esther said, and thank you for sharing those fundamental takeaways. I would just like to add here that number one is drop what is not working for you. It is so important. We tend to get attached to our cultural identity, our social identity, the isolated silos that we get put into, the cultural molds that we get put into, and it is difficult to break free. As our other panelists have mentioned, you can't get to where you want to be if you're stuck where you are. So to understand that if culture is not working for you, the not so good parts, drop the labels. If the labels that have been given to you by society and the world at large is not working for you, drop the label. If it is creating resistance, drop it. And then what is possible for you? What doors can be opened? That is very important to keep in mind. Be persistent, be patient, practice. Surround yourself with supportive network. Get access to those mentors, to those resources and tools as launch our professional development workshop, see that you can be there. If it is an evening webinar, see that you can be where. You do not have to have all your education done to feel that you know enough and you are enough. Education and learning is ongoing. Continue to invest in that. When we are persistent, when we are able to continue to help ourselves to grow personally and professionally, we become resilient. It is a journey, and the journey takes time. Even the river, it takes time to get from the mountain to the ocean. And through that time, water breaks down the resistance from hard rocks and turns those rocks into sand. So be water. You are unstoppable. You are powerful, you're complete, you're whole. Yes. And that's it, Ade. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. There's some philosophical touch to the end of that one. That's love it. I'm not just gonna, I think, just like you said, drop what's not working, embrace what's possible, be a learning machine. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We're gonna go to you next, Lola. Some key takeaways for the participants today.
I'm just going to make it brief. First, I just want to say thank you, Anuka, Elizabeth, and Esther. This has been a blessing. I feel like I have been reborn today. It's just been fantastic learning from you, amazing women. And also want to thank everyone for joining today. I know you've all left, or you're all going to leave this session just wanting to be bold, wanting to be fearless. I'm going to leave you all with a quote of mine that I always say to encourage everyone, especially immigrants and women. And it goes as, if you're not noticed, you're not recognized. And if you're not recognized, you're not promoted. So to get promoted, to get recognized, you have to make yourself noticed. If you have to speak up in a meeting, if you have to raise your hand, do what you can so that those who would give you a seat at the table can recognize you. So don't forget, as you go into this new week, be bold, be fearless, and raise your hand. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And I'll send it back to you, Ade, to round up the session.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Lola, for co-moderating this with me. I want to send a big shout out to all the panelists for joining us today. Amazing conversation around this very, very important topic. And we're so grateful to have this great group of panelists showing up on the weekend. Again, I'm very thankful to our great group of panelists and also all the participants for joining us today. It's a weekend. We really appreciate you joining us. I just want to say our mandate here at the Roundtable is to provide an avenue for our IT professional community to network, share information, and present opportunity for career growth. Essentially, our goal is to raise leaders, and we definitely hope that today's roundtable has contributed to that mandate. If you want to reach out to us again, our mandate is connect IT professionals to opportunities within the industry, provide training, education, and also employment placement services. We can be reached on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and any other social media platform. And our contact information is on the screen. Again, we do thank everybody. Thank all the panelists. I would thank my co-moderator for a great session today. Thank you, everyone. On behalf of the entire OLIT community, we thank you. And we say until next time, be well, stay safe, and bye for now.